Alright, so we're checking out the FlashFish P60 power station. So this is been around for a couple of years already, this model from FlashFish, one of their larger models. They actually make some smaller models. So this one here is 520 watt hours in capacity. Uses lithium ion cells, not lithium iron phosphate. So for those of you that are kind of looking for lithium ion cells, this is going to be more what you've been looking for. And just to give you an idea of what a 520 watt hours capacity gets you in terms of charge cycles for other devices where you can charge. Here's a little chart for what describes what you can charge up with that much capacity. This weighs about 15 pounds, and it's dimension-wise, it's 6.5 by 7.5 by 11.5, and it's a pretty small size for 520 watt hours capacity. So if you're looking for more energy density and something a little bit more compact and lightweight, this is probably one to check out. This comes with the user's guide here, and we'll take a look at the specs here in a second. And does come with a wall adapter that charges here on this input here. This is a 5521 barrel connector, and this is what that connector looks like. And here are the specs on the power adapter. It's 15 volts and 6 amps, so it's was at 90 watts max. And it does also charge off of this Anderson connector here. So if your power supply or solar panels use this connector, you can use that instead of the barrel connector. Just looking at all the ports here, you have two AC ports here, 110 volts and maximum of 560 watts. It does have a peak of 1100 watts, but I'll explain what happened in the power test in a second. This is the display, on-off button here to turn on the display right here, and basically just get a little meter showing how many bars you have of capacity, and it's in 20% increments. Wish it kind of showed in percentage, but this is a model from came out about 2 years ago, so it doesn't have that. And then to turn it off, you just press this, it turns on off the display, and then you have your DC outputs here, as well as your USB outputs. So they're separate. Sometimes DC and USB are combined, but they're separated here. So you press DC, that turns on the DC section here. You get 4 of these 5521 barrel connectors and a car port. And these are all unregulated ports that are connected directly to the battery inside. And I'll talk about the voltage range here in a second. I think it's like 9 to 12 volts if I remember right from the specs. And then the AC, turn that on. It turns on the inverter. It is a pure sine wave inverter. And then this over here turns on your USB. You have a USB, I think this is Quick Charge 2.0, USB-A, and then you have 2 regular USB-A's, it's just 5 volts and I think 3 amps. And then you have a USB-C. This is not power delivery, it's Quick Charge 3.0. And again, I'll show you the specs here in a second. So looking at the sides, you get some vents here on the left side. You get from some vents here on the right side, as well as a fan, cooling fan for the inverter. On the top here, you just have this handle, and you have a nice little silicone rubber grip here for the handle, very secure in holding it. And there's nothing on the back. And then on the bottom, it's just the specs. Just shows a summary of the specs here, and we'll talk about this in more detail as I look in the manual, but just letting you know that there's specs on the bottom of the sticker. Okay, taking a look at the manual, just have your standard protection modes here, short circuit and overload protection, and I'll talk about what happened in the AC test here in a second. And here are the specs in the manual. So 520 watt hours capacity, as I mentioned before, and here are the USB ports. So there's USB type A 5 volts to 9 volts at 2 amps, and that's actually Quick Charge 3.0. Then you have a type C 5 volts to 9 volts at 2 amps, also Quick Charge 3.0. So these aren't, the type C is not power delivery, so kind of wish it would be higher, but we'll show you what it does when I do the test here in a second. Then you get your 2 USB-A's at 5 volts and 3.1 amps, as I mentioned. Here are the specs on the DC output. Again, 4 5521 barrel connectors, and they're all connected, including the car port there. So there's actually all 5 of them have the same specs. So the voltage range is 9 to 12.6 volts, and max of 12 amps and nominal of 10 amps. Now, when I did my capacity test for this to get, to see how many watt hours I would get on this port here, on the card port, and I'm sure the barrel connectors are going to be the same. I was able to get 10 amps, but it didn't last as the voltage dropped from the initial voltage. When it was full, my capacity tester tried to maintain 10 amps, but wasn't able to do that, and so I had to lower it down to like 7.5 amps. So as the voltage goes down, this max amp, it does decrease, and it's towards the end of the battery, it's going to be more like 7 to 7.5 amps max pull on that on a lower voltage, and you're going to get down to around like 9.2 volts, and then the power station will be dead and it'll turn off. So I did get about 477 watt hours on the DC test and on my capacity tester, and that is roughly about 90 to 91% of efficiency, so it's about in line with other power stations. And here's a little diagram showing all the ports as well as the specs I just showed you, so you can take a look at that again. Just have a little diagram here about the solar charging input on the Anderson connector, DC of 18 to 22 volts, or 22 volts and 6 amps max. And they did send along the 100 watt solar panel that is fitted for this power station, and I actually used the barrel connector for that. And unfortunately, this diagram or the display on here does not show how many watts are coming in or going out. So I can just show you that it was charging. It's just that I didn't know what the rate of the charge was. It was a slightly cloudy day, so it's probably not 100 watts. Most likely something like on this day, probably like 50 to 60 watts. Now, if you do get the solar panel bundle with this one, if you get that particular solar panel, it does come with USB ports on the solar panel itself, so you can not only charge the power station, but you can also charge other devices directly off the solar panel via the USB ports. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what I did on the AC capacity testing. So I used this watt meter here, and I had to plug it in upside down, so I had it at the power station on its side, as you can see in this recording. I was able to get around 490 watts continuous, and then as soon as you go above like 500 watts, the power station just shuts off, and the overcurrent protection kicks in. So even though it says it's like 560 watts, I got like 500 watts, and then so I try to stay a little bit under to just maintain continuous discharge. So around 490 watts is what I can get continuously. Also, it says that it has 1100 watts of peak power, but it must be really, really short, because like I did a hair dryer that goes to like 1500 watts, and it just pretty much shuts off right away. So what happens is when the overcurrent protection kicks in, basically the power station just turns off, and to reset things, you just turn the AC section back on again, and everything's reset. I also did a capacity test on the AC section using this watt meter, and I got about 451 watt hours. So I think that's a roughly 85-86% efficiency on the AC. So the inverter here is about in line with most other power stations, are usually in the 80-85% range. Okay, so we'll do a quick test on the USB ports here. Turn those on. Let's see what rate we can get out of the USB-C port here. So plug in this power bank and should show input coming in. Yeah, it looks like it's around 17 watts. The max is probably 18 watts, which is in line with the specs. All right, so this is the USB-A port, which quick charge 3.0, so it should be the same. Should be around 17 watts. And I'm using a USB-A cable here, so it is only getting about 8 watts here on this particular cable. Let's see if I try a different port here. Maybe that this one is not recognizing that as quick charge 3.0. Yeah, it's about the same, so I may need a different cable. Okay, so I tried a different cable, and I'm getting about the same as before. So looks like this port's max is about 8 watts. Let's try the regular USB-A port there. It's going to be 5 volts at 2.1 amps. It's going to be like around the same. It looks like about 7.8, 7.7 watts. And probably the same for the other one as well. And this one here is like around 6 watts, it looks like. Alright, so I think it's going to cover for this video. I think my conclusions on this one overall, this power station is pretty basic. It doesn't have a display that shows input and output wattage, which is pretty important these days. But, you know, if you kind of already know what the limits are for these particular ports, then maybe it doesn't particularly matter if you're just sticking to devices that are within that power range. Now, I do like that it is kind of compact and small and lightweight for the amount of capacity. You saw that my last power station review on the All Powers R600, that was like 299 watt hours. Not quite half, but maybe like around 60% capacity of this one. And that was a larger power station. So this, you get a lot more capacity in this one, and it's smaller. I think that's because they're using lithium ion cells. Now, granted, lithium ion chemistry is not going to last as long in terms of power cycles. Now, I did see that they offer a lifetime warranty on the battery, which is unusual for lithium ion because they tend to wear out after around 800 cycles, 500 to 800 cycles, versus lithium iron phosphate, which is going to last you like 5,000 to 8,000 cycles, 10 times as long. So it's kind of unusual, but I'm not sure if people will be keeping something like this long enough to actually take advantage of the warranty. The other important thing to note is on the carport and on all these 12-volt DC outputs, because it's unregulated and the voltage drops all the way down to like 9 volts, keep in mind that some of your 12-volt devices may not like that. Some of the newer power stations keep the voltage range in a more narrow band, somewhere like 10.5 volts to like around 13 volts, so a little bit higher, so that's usually generally more accepted. So keep in mind as you get down to the lower end of this battery, like say like 25% capacity, and the voltage on here is coming down to like maybe below 10 volts. Some of your 12 volts devices may not like that, so keep that in mind. If you're considering this power station, you may not be able to use it when the battery gets lower. So I think it's going to conclude for this video. If you got any questions, comments, etc., let me know down in the comment section below. I'll put a link to this down in the video description if you guys want to check it out, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.